On a warm January afternoon in 1919, a wall of death rolled through the streets of Boston at 35 miles an hour. It was 25 feet tall. It flattened buildings. It killed 21 people. And it was made entirely of molasses. This is Graveyard Footnotes, history's strangest true stories, dug up. And today's grave was filled with syrup. Because this is the story of how the city of Boston got partially destroyed by a tidal wave of pancake topping. Yes, it is real. And no, it is genuinely not funny. Mostly. Our story takes place in the north end of Boston, a crowded working class, mostly Italian immigrant neighborhood packed tight against the waterfront. And looming over all of it stood a giant steel tank owned by the Purity Distilling Company. Now you might be wondering why anyone needs a giant tank of molasses in the middle of a city. The answer is alcohol. Molasses was fermented into industrial alcohol, used to make munitions for the First World War, and rum to make everybody feel better about it. It was, briefly, big business. The tank was enormous, 50 feet tall, 90 feet wide, and on the day it failed, it was holding around 2.3 million gallons of molasses. That is roughly 13,000 tons of the stickiest, heaviest liquid you can imagine, all in one place. There was just one small problem. The tank was garbage. It had been thrown up in a hurry back in 1915 by a company that skipped the testing, ignored the engineering, and hired a man to oversee it who could not even read a blueprint. The thing was a disaster waiting for a schedule. And it leaked. From the very first day, molasses oozed out of the seams so badly that local kids would go and scoop it up in cans for free dessert. The company's brilliant solution was not to fix it. It was to paint the whole tank brown so you could not see the leaks. Foolproof. Locals also reported that the tank groaned and rumbled every time it was filled. Ominous, metallic, structural groaning. The kind of sound that says, hey, maybe stand somewhere else. Everyone ignored it, because that is what we do. Then came January 15th, 1919. It had been brutally cold, but that day the temperature suddenly jumped above 40 degrees. Warm molasses expands, warm molasses ferments, and a tank already stuffed past its limit does not love surprises. Just after 12:30 in the afternoon, people nearby heard a sound like a machine gun. That was the rivets. Hundreds of them, firing out of the steel skin of the tank one after another as it began to tear itself apart. And then the whole thing simply let go. What came out was a wave of molasses estimated at 25, maybe 40 feet high, moving at around 35 miles an hour. Think about that. A black tidal wave, faster than you can run, made of something that is heavier than water and clings to absolutely everything it touches. The wave hit the neighborhood like a bomb. It snapped the steel supports of the elevated railway like they were toothpicks. It picked up a train and shoved it. It tore buildings off their foundations and dragged them down the street. An entire firehouse was knocked sideways and crushed. And it swept up everything alive in its path. People, horses, carts. They were carried along, slammed into debris, and buried. The molasses was so dense that being hit by it was less like a flood and more like being hit by a moving building. And here is where it stops being a funny story about syrup. Because drowning in molasses is a genuinely horrifying way to die. It filled mouths and lungs. It pulled people down and held them there. Survivors described it as trying to swim through wet cement that was slowly setting around them. Rescue was almost impossible. The first responders waded in and immediately got stuck, knee-deep, waist-deep, unable to move. Every step pulled the molasses up around them. They could see people trapped just a few feet away and physically could not reach them in time. When the wave finally settled, the north end looked like a war zone painted brown. 2 and 3 feet of molasses sat in the streets. Wreckage everywhere. Bodies so coated in the stuff that some of them were not identified for days. The whole district was glued in place. In the end, 21 people were killed and around 150 were injured. Men, women, children, workers on their lunch break, a kid collecting firewood, all taken out by a substance most people only ever meet on top of a stack of pancakes. The cleanup was a nightmare of its own. Sailors, the Red Cross, police, and hundreds of volunteers descended on the neighborhood. They quickly learned that fresh water did nothing. The only thing that cut through the molasses was salt water, pumped straight from the harbor. It took weeks just to clear the streets and months to fully clean the district. And it spread. Rescuers and gawkers tracked molasses onto trolley seats, into homes, onto phone booths and doorknobs all across Boston. For ages, half the city was faintly, miserably sticky. Boston Harbor itself ran brown with molasses until the summer. And then, of course, came the part where everybody tried very hard to not be the one who pays for this. The company that owned the tank had a bold legal strategy. They claimed it was not their fault at all. No, they insisted, the tank had been blown up by anarchists with a bomb. It was the perfect scapegoat for 1919, a country terrified of radicals and bombings. It did not work. What followed was one of the longest and largest civil lawsuits in the history of Massachusetts. Years of hearings, hundreds of witnesses, an army of expert engineers brought in to argue in enormous detail about exactly how badly you have to build a tank for it to commit mass murder. And the verdict was damning. There was no bomb. There were no anarchists. The tank had failed for the most boring reason imaginable. It was too thin, too weak, badly built, never tested, and crammed with more molasses than it could ever safely hold. The company was found responsible and forced to pay. But the flood actually changed something. The sheer scale of the negligence was so shocking that it helped push through new rules, requiring engineers and architects to actually sign off on and stamp their structural plans. The next time you stand in a building that does not collapse on you, you can quietly thank the molasses. Scientists have since gone back and worked out why it was so deadly. Cold molasses is thick and slow, which is why people assumed they could outrun it. But the warm wave moved fast at first, then thickened around its victims as it cooled, turning escape into a trap. Physics with a body count. Today there is just a small plaque marking the spot where it happened. The tank is long gone. The neighborhood was rebuilt. Life moved on, the way it always does over the top of a tragedy. But the locals will tell you that on a hot summer day, if you stand in just the right spot in the north end, you can still catch it. A faint, sweet smell of molasses rising up out of the old bricks, the ground itself remembering what was poured into it. 21 people killed by a substance you put on breakfast because a company decided that paint was cheaper than safety. History filed it away as a weird little curiosity. We just dug it back up as a footnote. This has been Graveyard Footnotes. Subscribe, and we will see you at the next grave.